I thought when Woody said he had saved the weirdest for last, he meant me. So I'm pretty relieved that he did not. I'm very used to sitting out where you all are with my mother and listening to the Louisville Orchestra play right here. So I feel the need to make a whole lot of noise. I want to welcome you all to my home state of Kentucky. I want to give you that welcome on behalf of my family and of the Berry Center, which I run. And it has been our honor to partner with Slow Money, or well, that's taking way too much credit, to endorse Slow Money's meeting here. I have lived and farmed in Henry County, Kentucky all my life. My father was born in 1934, and I was born in 1958. Daddy saw the end of solar-powered agriculture, and I saw the end of community agriculture, neighbors working together. That is to say that I remember a better time, a time when for a little while, about 75 years, farmers in our state could afford to farm well. Farmers were for a short time out of an emergency. The memory of that and the vision of a time like that coming again is the work of the Berry Center. And I am pleased and proud to join Slow Money and all of you to work on what I know is a shared vision. There's information available for those of you who would like to know more about what we're doing at the Berry Center, and I invite and encourage you to seek that information out. But I want to talk about agricultural economy. To introduce myself and my family to you, I want to tell you a story. This story starts my family's public life. To do so, I quote from my father from the beginning of an essay called "It All Turns on Affection," and I quote, "One night in the winter of 1907, at what we have always called the home place in Henry County, Kentucky, my father, then 6 years old, sat with his older brother and listened as their parents spoke of the uses they would have for the money for their 1906 tobacco crop. The crop was to be sold at auction in Louisville on the next day. They would have been sitting in the light of a kerosene lamp, close to the stove, warming themselves before bedtime. They were not wealthy people. I believe that the debt on their farm was not fully paid. There would have been interest to pay. There would have been other debts. The depression of the 1890s would have left them burdened. Perhaps after the income from the crop had paid their obligations, there would be some money that they could spend as they chose. At around 2 o'clock the next morning, my father was wakened by a horse's shod hooves on the stones of the driveway. His father was leaving to catch the train to see the crop sold. He came home that evening without a dime. After the crop had paid its transportation to market and the commission on its sale, there was nothing left. Thus began my father's lifelong advocacy, later my brother's and my own, and now my daughter's and my son's, for small farmers and for land-conserving economies," unquote. I remember my grandfather, John Berry Sr., telling that story and others about seeing men leaving tobacco warehouses with tears running down their faces. He would say to me, "I thought then, if I can do something about this, I will," and he did. What he did, my father says, was the important work. He says he and his brother John Berry Jr. have just followed. I have now taken it up. My grandfather was the principal author of the Burley Tobacco Program. The idea of the Berry Center originated in my perception from meetings and encounters over several years that in the agencies and commissions of official agriculture, the tobacco program has been forgotten. I heard nobody speaking of it or thinking of it as a still viable kind of program for protecting the livelihoods of small farmers. And let me say quickly that I'm not talking about tobacco as a cash crop for farmers now. I am talking about what we call the Producers Program itself. The Burley Tobacco Program was the only farm program that ever did what a farm program was supposed to do: represent the interest of farmers. Following the example set by my grandfather, I am calling the best agrarian minds in this state together to see how the Producers Program can be used to again protect farmers from overproduction, bring parity back into the conversation, stabilize rural communities, and make possible an economy of cooperation, not competition, this time with an economy based on food and forestry. The Burley Tobacco Program was a product of the New Deal, a growers' cooperative where members agreed to limit production in exchange for price supports. The co-op operated at no net cost to the government and was highly popular with farmers, passing by an overwhelming majority every time it was put to a vote. It was popular because it worked. Limiting production prevented oversupply, gave stability to the market, kept prices up, and protected small farmers from powerful tobacco companies. It supported a land-conserving economy that allowed knowledge, work, and farmland to pass seamlessly from generation to generation. In my work at the Berry Center, the example of the Burley Tobacco Program is invaluable, in the same way that the Amish are essential as an example for my father. The program gives us an example and a context in which to think about and maybe some ways to solve the predicament what is left of our farm population is in. For those of us living in rural America, it is clear that our present economic assumptions are failing in agriculture, and to those who have eyes to see, the evidence is everywhere, in the cities as well as in the countryside. 16% of us live in rural places, and of those 16%, so few of us farm that we are not counted on the U.S. Census. In Kentucky, it has been 10 years since the end of the tobacco program. As of a couple of months ago, I was still saying that we had 84,000 small farms in our state. The 2012 Ag Census says that we have 77,000 farms and are leading the nation in the loss of farmland. In the time leading up to the end of the tobacco program, Kentucky farmers were bombarded with news articles explaining why the tobacco program should be abolished and how Kentucky farmers would be better off without it. Our then governor called it a Depression-era farm program. Our state's largest farm lobby said that Kentucky farmers could outcompete anyone. But all such talk ended when the program ended, and as far as I know, the matter has not been revisited to see if the claims and promises match the realities at home. The reality is that our small communities have not recovered. Our town no longer has a grocery store. The local tractor dealership went out of business last year. Our county government is broke. Our schools can't afford to buy books, and our farm is the last working farm on our road. The countryside that is still being farmed is often being badly farmed. Our part of Kentucky is rolling and well-suited for livestock on permanent pasture and for hay crops, perennial agriculture. That fragile landscape is plowed up, and the resulting toxicity and erosion is a barely talked about disaster. What does all of this mean in the face of, according to a demand study done in Louisville in 2012, 5 times the demand for local food than we have supply? Well, it means that the urban demand for sustainably raised local food going up has met the rural culture coming down. It was bound to happen. It means that generational farmers whose interest in growing food for local markets was piqued as a result of efforts to move beyond a tobacco economy in the 90s, but have given up on a market they don't understand and have no reason to trust. In short, the excitement about locally raised food in the cities is not matched in the countryside. It means that the singular demand for production in our modern industrial agriculture has been unable to acknowledge the importance of the sources of production in nature and in human culture. Of course, agriculture must be productive. That requirement is as urgent as it is obvious. But urgent as it is not the first requirement. There are 2 more requirements equally important and equally urgent. One is that if agriculture is to remain productive, it must preserve the land and the fertility and the ecological health of the land. The land, that is, must be used well. A further requirement, therefore, is that if the land is to be used well, the people who use it must know it well, must be highly motivated to use it well, must know how to use it well, must have time to use it well, and must be able to afford to use it well. Nothing that has happened in the agricultural revolution of the last 50 years has disproved or invalidated these requirements, though everything that has happened has ignored or defied them. For a time, and in my memory, my home country the farming in my home country was profitable and diversified. Farmers, because of the program I described earlier, were out of an emergency. I grew up working with people who didn't consider their crop in until everyone's crop was in. This was an agrarian community, the kind that we must see again, this time not dependent on a harmful crop. I think often of this quotation from Bren Smith's editorial in the New York Times. Quote, "The dirty little secret of the food movement is that the much celebrated small-scale farmer isn't making a living," unquote. Food is a cultural product, and the food most Americans are eating today reflects the culture that we are living in. To deal correctly with the problems I am talking about, we must first of all be content, or try to be, with the notion of small solutions. We must also be content, or try to be, with the apparent slowness of our work. If we move too quickly or are quick to accept large solutions, we will be following the example of the industrial mind, a mind that has accepted the official quasi-religious litany of synonyms: labor-saving, efficiency, progress, convenience, speed, and comfort. I believe that the only way to save farmland and farm people is a good farm economy. If farmers and consumers wish to promote a sustainable, safe, reasonably inexpensive supply of good food, then we must see that the best, the safest, and most dependable source of food for a city is not the global economy, with its extreme vulnerabilities and extravagant transportation costs, but its own surrounding countryside. It is, in every way, in the best interest of urban consumers to be surrounded by productive land, well-farmed and well-maintained by thriving farm families in thriving farm communities. We have a bipolar food system. On the one side, we have small and entrepreneurial, on the other, huge and industrial, with not much in the middle. I believe that farmers will look again with interest at raising for a local market if they are offered some kind of economy that they can trust, that they can plan an economic year around. I think the Producers Program offers us the best model for that to happen, and I think it will not be a federal or state program. I think it will be city to city. As we have found in Louisville, we can work with city government. The mayor of Louisville still has local affections and knows what we're talking about. If we agree that food is a cultural product, then we must agree that our culture needs to change. It seems to me that slow money is asking us to think about our whole economy, not just pieces, in order to become a land-conserving economy. I spoke of the Burley Tobacco Program and its idea of parity a minute ago. It is useful here to quote my grandfather, John Berry Sr. This is a quotation from a speech he gave to Congress on April 20th, 1948. Quote, "The parity concept is the happiest and most fortunate thought that has visited the minds of statesmen of this country in generations. It accords with our way of life and gives real and tangible meaning to the philosophy of equal opportunity. It is a consistent American way of striving for and approaching parity of income without the use of direct subsidy payments by the government. It must be preserved and effectuated to the end that farmers may continue to enjoy the high standard of living and opportunity which they have had only a taste of," unquote. But what did parity mean to my grandfather? The farmers that my grandfather served all his life were shaped by the Great Depression and the Jeffersonian ideal of the small landholder as the most precious part of a state. When he talked about parity, he was talking about a farm population who was still self-sufficient and who used and reused everything. If some of us think that working on an economy based on cooperation, not competition, is a good idea, then we have to talk about non-economic intangibles such as neighborly work and love, affection and thrift, non-economic terms that turn out to have economic consequences. It seems wrong to me to talk about economies and leave out these issues, and so to illustrate, I will quote from two men. One man I know very well, and one who is fictional. The first is my husband. He's the real one. I have, on occasion in my life, wondered what it would be like to have a fictional husband, but not right now. My husband's name is Steve Smith. He had the first CSA in Kentucky. He started it in 1990 and ran it for 15 years before passing his list and his help down to a younger farmer. The CSA enabled him to pay off his farm at 13% interest. He wrote a piece called What Young Farmers Need to Know and gave it at St. Catherine College, where the Berry Center's farming program is. He ended his piece with this list. 1, we have substituted fossil fuels for knowledge, and now farmers are cut off from the information we need most, how to build and maintain healthy soil. 2, most of the information given to farmers these days is sales talk. We must stop looking for store-bought solutions and use what is free and at hand: animal manure, compost, cover crops, crop rotations, genetic diversity, seed saving, natural systems and cycles, husbandry, thrift, frugality, local economy, local communities. 3, we must rethink the way we market our crops, adding value to them when and where we can. Forming relationships with your buyers is the simplest, easiest way to do this. By allowing your customers to get to know you through CSAs, farmers markets, direct marketing, and so forth, you add value to your farm products and strengthen the local economy. 6, if you can clear $6,000 an acre, how many acres do you really need? Not that many. By using small-scale technology, low-cost and no-cost techniques, there is no need to borrow a lot of money and lots of reasons not to. The most important being, if you go too deep into debt, neither you nor your land will have the last say. 5, it is not simple. The details of the farming operation need to be written down on paper, just a working set of plans that include budgets, crop rotations, seed varieties, planting dates, harvest schedules, buyers, markets, and so forth. The market plan will require the most work. Remember, do your marketing before you do your planting. 6, farmers need to know that we have very few friends in high places. The global economy does not have our best interest at heart. Agribusiness corporations do not have our best interest at heart. We must therefore look to those who do: our friends and neighbors, our local communities, and local economies. The second list is a pretty good complement to the first. It is from a story of Daddy's called The Branch Way of Doing. It is a story of the Port William membership. The character Andy Catlett is observing his friend Danny Branch and his family. Quote, he believes that the way they live and the way they are can be summed up, not explained, by a set of economic principles, things Danny could have told his children but probably never did or needed to. Andy, anyhow, after many years of observing and pondering, has made a list of instructions that he hears in Danny's voice, whether or not Danny can be supposed ever to have said them. 1, be happy with what you've got. Don't be always looking for something better. 2, don't buy anything you don't need. 3, don't buy what you ought to save. Don't buy what you ought to make. 4, unless you absolutely have got to do it, don't buy anything new. 5, if somebody tries to sell you something to save labor, look out. If you can work, then work. If other people want to buy a lot of new stuff and fill up the country with junk, use the junk. 7, some good things are cheap, even free. Use them first. 8, keep watch for what nobody wants. Sort through the leavings. 9, you might know or find out what it is to need help, so help people. At the Berry Center, we are on the side of the farmer. These two lists combined seem to me the soundest advice for anyone, but especially the young, who take up the work of a sounder, healthier local agriculture. And excellent advice for those of us who want to work on a culture who will support them. I recently gave a talk called Institutionalizing the Work of a Crank, of a self-described crank, and the Kindest of Fathers. My father, did I mention that my father's name is Wendell Berry? Possibly I didn't. My father calls himself a crank and is one when it comes to some things. Anything with a screen, speedboats, the fact that people have freed themselves of physical work and now go to fitness centers, the idea of a vacation, shopping, and so on. All this is often pretty funny, and Daddy is often pretty amused with himself. And he could hardly help being a crank. He comes from generations of them, funny, charming cranks. I have given that word a lot of thought, and I'm thinking now that we would all do well to be a little cranky. Not unkind or harsh, just cranky. To keep ourselves honest, we must first make sure that we understand that we are all implicit in the mess we're in. My friend Wes Jackson says that if we come out of all this effort to make things better with a bunch of squiggly light bulbs and Priuses, we won't have done much. In the latest issue of The New Yorker, there's a cartoon of a couple eating dinner. The man says to the woman, "Did this come from the community garden? It tastes sanctimonious." But I think we must agree that some crankiness is called for. One of the worst traits in people is that we can get used to anything, and that is what we have done, and we have let people call what has happened to our farms and farmers inevitable. So if crankiness is what brings about an effort like Slow Money, TILF, American Farmland Trust, or Kentucky's Community Farm Alliance, or the many Save Our Land, farms, forests, families, etc., then count me in. I am proud to join you all and my family in an alliance of cranks. Thank you.